Good morning, everybody. It is that time. 9 o'clock, and here we are. Welcome to everyone. If this is your first time joining us, I am Tony Best. Along with me is my friend Christine McHugh. We again do not have slides. This is purposeful, so you can look at us if you want to, because we're on video, but you can also just close your eyes and listen if you are tired of looking at screens. This is intentionally a fluid conversation about topics that are coming up for us in our networks, in our companies, with the leaders that we work with, and today we are going to talk about meetings, and the overrunning craziness of meetings, and how do you handle that? So thank you, Christine, for being with me again this morning. Always a pleasure to have you here, and welcome.
Good morning. It's kind of funny that we're kind of having a meeting about meetings.
That is funny. That is
Maybe
funny.
this is a convening about meetings versus a meeting about meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully what comes out of this meeting about meetings is just some really practical things to help people minimize the unnecessary meetings and maximize the impact of the meetings that they do have. That's the hope. I think we've just noticed through and just thinking back through some of the topics that you and I have talked about, Christine, initially when we're like, everything's changing all the time, right now everything is changing. There's new research all the time. How its impact on business is changing. What we need to do for our employees is changing. How we need to think about these things is changing. And so just thinking about meetings during a global pandemic, even one of the first things that we talked about was, right now you kind of need to be meeting more. Right? Like, we're sending people out into a different work environment. You need to be touching base even more. In the beginning, our executive team was meeting on a daily basis. We've backed that off quite a bit. So now it's 2 mornings a week. We have very specific topics that we're talking about. And, that's so much about just checking in inside of each meeting and saying, like, do we still need these? But when you're launching into something new and everybody's meeting more, now we kind of have to back up and say, like, what's necessary and what's not necessary, and what's too much, what's too little. How do we make the most use of our time? I'll pause there. See what's going on in your
Well,
thoughts.
it's interesting because, from my community network, my clients, my business colleagues, people have definitely stepped up in this over communication, which we talked about as being such an important thing, because without communicating enough, people fill in gaps on their own. But then now there's this resulting fatigue that I think is a little dissimilar from normal back-to-back meeting structures, because you have the digital element, which causes eye strain. Actually, I got these new blue light glasses to help. But also there's not the typical physical movement that you have potentially in a work environment or office, where you may physically be moving, like people are sitting still. So I've heard people have, in this quest to over communicate, have not necessarily built in enough space to take breaks. So it isn't even about the content of the meetings. It's like just trying to create space and breaks so that people are not getting burn out from sitting in one spot and staring at a screen. So, and I think that is helping people be a little bit more judicious and discerning about what content is needed. So that's just a couple of things that I've heard about, and people trying to adapt to that and figure out what is the right cadence, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just did a content piece. I think it's coming out in one of our mini paths this week, maybe, that is about Zoom fatigue. And, when everyone went to work from home, it was really easy to get everybody on camera, right? Like, you get into a meeting, everybody turns their camera on. It was kind of expected to turn on your camera. And this Zoom fatigue thing is real. It's, both, you talked about the blue light blockers, right? Like being on a computer screen all the time is intense. But there's also, when you're in a meeting with human beings and you're in the same room, you're moving your eyes around the room all the time. You're looking from one person to another. You might look out the window, you might look up to a screen, and you're taking in the entire environment. If you close your eyes for a minute because you're thinking, as long as it's just for a second, no one thinks you're sleeping, right? But when you're on camera, if you are, if you get up and stand up to stretch your legs, or you look away from the screen, there's all of this, whether you're thinking about it or not, we have this like, well, I don't want people to think I'm not paying attention. Or, there's the distraction of all the notifications coming up on your screen of what's going on. And so we're just like so into this one tiny piece of technology in front of us that it can be really draining. And we kind of have to take new things into consideration. It actually makes me think a lot about our team members who are always remote, and thinking about like, why are they not always on their camera? I understand now why they aren't always on their camera. It can be really draining to be like just looking at a computer screen. And also, if you see yourself on the camera, if you're like me, you're like, when did those get that deep? Like, I didn't notice those before. I'm not seeing myself on camera all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've noticed that people are more and more turning their cameras off. Especially towards the end of the day, just needing a break from all of it. A couple of things too, like related to meetings that I've heard about, and I'd be curious to what are some of the practices at Aduro, is some of my clients and colleagues are establishing either meeting free zones, like they're not actually scheduling meetings during this time, or they're scheduling everybody needs to be available during this time so that they can kind of work around the flexible schedules. And kind of put some boundaries on either side of that so that people aren't feeling like they need to be always on. Mm-hmm. And that they can actually, have some thinking time or caring for their family time, or maybe just taking an exercise break. So that's one thing that I think it's actually created in a good way. And I hope it's something that lasts, as people start returning to offices, is more flexible schedules in a way that honor, the other commitments people have, but also the fact that we need breaks in the day. So that's one thing that I've heard that is working, and I would love to see continue. What have you been experiencing and exploring at Aduro as it relates to the meeting structures themselves?
Yeah, we have a meeting strategy that we put together in 2016 that, we've kind of over time, we've gotten a little lax about it. So we revived it. We, tweaked it a little bit based on current circumstances, but ultimately the idea was to decrease the number of meetings. We find, because you're not having so much just interaction in the halls at the office, all of our calendars are filling up with meetings. So, we wanted to decrease the number of meetings, and then again, like trying to include everybody so everyone knows what's going on. We're finding some meetings are just overrun with like a large number of people. So we wanted to decrease the number of people in the meeting. Like some people don't need to be in the meeting. They just actually need the decision, what happened in the meeting, or the follow-up notes. Of course, reducing people's screen time was a big piece of this. Expanding deep work time. So you talked about meeting free zones. We have 2 now that we implemented just last week. And then, providing some white space in between meetings. So, not scheduling 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but scheduling 25 minutes or 50 minutes. And so, we have 2 meeting free zones now, Tuesday afternoons and Thursday mornings, where we understand sometimes you might need to take a client meeting, or if you're in sales, that might be when your finalist presentation is. But for internal meetings, we don't have any internal meetings Tuesday afternoons or Thursday mornings. This is, really to allow people more deep work time to dive into their work without distractions, and really be able to get some good thinking done, and get some good progress and productivity in the work that they're doing. But also, just removing that need to be looking at the screen all the time. The other big thing that, I've even noticed just in the number of steps I take each day, because I don't have to walk between one meeting room and another, even, that all of my meetings happen in the same place now. And even if I do move rooms, they're a little closer together than they are at the office. And so, providing those 5 or 10 minute breaks in between and scheduling the 25 or the 50-minute meetings. So you have 5 to 10 minutes to take a bio break, to get a snack, to get a glass of water, to take a quick walk, those kinds of things, and just like get your face away from the screen as well. So those are a few things. Something that we have not implemented, but I heard this weekend, one of my friends said that what they've started doing in all of their meetings is that they turn their camera on for the first 5 minutes. So they're all kind of connecting with each other and they're seeing each other's faces. And then after that 5 minutes, it's totally fine to turn your camera off if you feel like, that helps you to just be more present in the meeting and those sorts of things. So those are a few of the things that we have done to try to create a little more deep work time, a little less screen time. And then, of course, like the thing that we've really focused in on is go look at your calendar and see, like, are these meetings necessary? Do you really need to have them? If you do need to have them, do you need all of those people in them? Making sure there's a clear purpose. What do you want to get out of this meeting? What's the roles and responsibilities of everybody in the meeting? And do you have a clear agenda of, like, what are you going to hit on during this meeting? So those are some of the things that we've done to try to just like create a little more structure around them and a little more flexibility around how you show up to them, and forgiveness around if you don't want your video camera on too.
No, I think that's smart. I like that idea of starting out a meeting, with video just for connection, because people are craving connection. Now, obviously, it depends on your workplace culture, but if you have that connection, but then you also have the opportunity to turn it off without worry about being judged or people questioning your participation, or are you paying attention, those sorts of things. I think that's really important. I've also started declining a few meetings for that reason. And granted, I work for myself, but I do have clients and I am involved in several nonprofits, and I have things that I'm pretty involved in. And I had somebody try and book a meeting, and I said, I'm not going to book another meeting. And she said, well, you're super busy. And I was like, actually, I don't want to be any busier. That's why I'm declining it. Right. So setting those boundaries and figuring out, what do you really need to be involved in? And does it really need to be scheduled? I think are super important. Another practice I was just thinking about, and I think we may have talked about this on past sessions, is that a lot of organizations have adopted some sort of practice of doing a kind of check in with the team at the beginning of the meeting. I call it a health check, but it's, a temperature check. I have one client that does it. They ask on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the word I'm looking for? How are you feeling about where the organization's at? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling about where you're at in your work? And that gives them an opportunity to dialogue. They don't do that every week, but they do it on a pretty regular basis to kind of calibrate. And another friend of mine who is an executive at a company here in town, she is something similar with her team, just to like, where are you at today? And that helps shape the content of the meeting. Again, it doesn't need to be every meeting, but it is an opportunity to connect and see where people are moving or where people are at. So that's a practice that I think sounds like it has a lot of benefits. I think some companies that have certain rituals to begin meetings are trying to figure out what those rituals are too, because they changed a little bit in this environment, but it's also created an opportunity for people to create new rituals, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, this whole pandemic just breeds innovation, right? Opportunity for innovation. So so that's part of the meeting structure. Health checks have been something I've heard is a pretty common for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, we do in my team, my direct team, we start our team meetings with a well-being check. We do a green, yellow, red. My team gets pretty creative with the color that they choose. Sometimes it's chartreuse, depending on where they are. And so, just checking in with how they're doing that day. If they want to add anything to it, great. If not, we're just there to support them. And then we also add in their wins that they've had from last week. And part of that goes back to our conversation around recognition and appreciation is, actually the things that we don't get to see all the time now because we're not around them, asking them to share those things so we can kind of highlight the great things that are happening inside of the team. And both of those things, both the well-being check and the sharing wins, kind of help set the tone for the meeting right up front, even though we've got roadblocks we need to figure out how to move or problems that we need to solve. We at least set it up with a positive and optimistic outlook. There's something that we've actually added to, when I say we released a meeting strategy last week, we actually have like a document, we called it a suggestion, which was a suggestion / policy, this isn't rules based. This is actually trying to help you, create more space in your day. And one of the things that we added to the meeting is because, we're not necessarily moving from place to place, and there's not a clear distinction between, when you get up from one meeting and you walk into another meeting, there's at least something that shifts. But if you're just going back to back meetings from your computer, it's a little more difficult to shift your mind and get into the next meeting. So we added a recommendation to just start with some kind of human moment. Even if it's just like pause for a moment, everybody take a deep breath and recognize you're here with other people. What's the purpose of this meeting? Why are we here? What's your intention? And just kind of setting it up to get everybody like in this meeting with this purpose and away from whatever you were doing before.
I love that. It kind of reminds me of when when I'm done working for the day, when I start cooking dinner, it's like this whole transition. I like picture a portal. Like I'm going through a portal from work to home, even if I'm in the same space. And you've got a portal at the beginning of every meeting. Like, here we are. Yeah. Very grounding and also centering of what the purpose is. Yeah. I love that, especially in this back-to-back virtual environment.
For those of you out there listening, I would love if you would chat in some things that are working for you, some of the creative ideas that you've had that are helping with this overrun of meeting situation. Or if you've got questions, you can put them in the Q&A. I saw that Regina says, just a comment, as a 19-year teleworker, I save the camera for clients. I avoid the camera sometimes with coworkers. The reality is you need to multitask during some meetings. Right now, I imagine parents with young kids schooling at home need to juggle action behind the scenes. Yeah. Well, and that's another thing too, just being at home and being on camera is now you're inviting people into your personal life a little bit, even if you're only in a meeting, like maybe you're, straining to see what books are on my, on my bookshelf back there. Right. Or, looking to see I wonder what that picture is behind Christine. When we're all in the same room in a meeting, we have the same things. We have the same distractions and there's the same things in the room, and maybe a fire truck goes by, but it's going by for everybody and not just for one person, So thank you, Regina, for sharing. Others of you out there, what are the things that are working for you with this meeting topic? Things that, or things that are just like you're struggling with and that you have questions about, please chat those in. And I think, just revisiting some of the topics that we've talked about up until now and thinking of how does it wrap into meetings, really asking yourself, and I'm kind of pulling out some of the things that you had said, Christine, asking yourself, is this meeting necessary? But also, like, do I need to be in this meeting? It might be a very necessary meeting, but you might realize, like, I don't need to take this on, or I just send me the notes afterwards. This is one thing that we actually put in our recommendations. And I think sometimes it's necessary to give people that permission, like if you don't know what your purpose is in the meeting, feel free to ask so that if you actually need to be in this meeting or not. I saw a comment come in from Loretta. The hard thing is the giant team meetings when your part is only 15 minutes. Yeah. I agree. And like my team meeting only has 6 people in it, like just those that are, the closest people. But I think, we have a couple of meetings. We even worked some of our meeting free zones around some of those larger team meetings where, they're meeting for a pretty decent period of time every week. And they've got 25 people in the meeting because it's the team, right? They need this information. And even for those, we've kind of asked them to look at, do you need that full amount of time all the time? Do you need just, half that time, some of the time, or even does everybody always need to be there? Leslie, I'm happy you shared your ideas about overload. My team is headed to burnout. I will start my meetings at the beginning of the week with a health check. The 1 to 10 will help me see who I need to have an extra check-in with. Absolutely. And that's something that I've really done since the beginning too, Leslie, is in our executive team meetings, and I check in with our senior leaders as well, and just ask, like, is there anyone in the organization that's going through something tough that could use a little extra love? And we had a couple of people last week that had dogs pass away, and those are things that, like, when they happen and people are in the office, there's a lot of people that are supporting that person and having conversations. But all of that stuff that's happening in our personal lives too, we love to just check in with people. It's amazing what hey, how are you doing? I heard this is going on. What support do you need can really help people to even just know that they're cared about and that we're thinking about them. I see a question from Joe. What are your thoughts on unavoidable background noise in meetings? Kids, cars, should you acknowledge them ahead of time? Joe, that's a great question. And, I think we've touched on some of these things so far. I can tell you one of my favorite meetings of the week, and is on Fridays. One of our moms, she has a nanny that takes care of her little one, and she's blessed to be able to do that. And she lets her go early on Fridays so that she can get back to her own family. And so she brings her little one, who's how old is she now? 9 months maybe. And it's lunchtime. And so she brings her little one to the meeting. And, I think if it's in every meeting, that could end up being a distraction, but this is kind of like that Friday meeting. She's always trying to be on mute. And we're like, and unless your little one is screaming, you don't have to be on mute. It's kind of cute to hear the little noise in the background, right? I think in the beginning, especially with the moms that had their little ones around, they would apologize for the things that are happening. I think we just all have to have a little more grace with ourselves and with others. And, acknowledging that there's kids in the background, or we're all at home, there's going to be some noise outside that I think sometimes I've got 6 neighbors that are all doing crazy loud yard work all at the same time. And, we just have to give ourselves a little more grace, and we have to give each other a little more grace. Kind of brings us back to just being exceedingly human during this time, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember about a month ago, I was on a Zoom meeting with a client, and there was a few people, and I don't remember what happened. I think my dog started barking, and I have a little dog who's a mama's boy. He follows me everywhere. He doesn't really bark that much, but something startled him outside, even though he was inside with me. And I apologized. And the one of the people I was on the meeting with says, Christine, stop apologizing. This is kind of how things are for people right now. And so I think that giving grace is important. And also, I think it was last Thursday, I was on a call, and one of the attendees, she has a 4-year-old, and he started doing handstands, and his feet were literally in the camera. And she was really apologetic, but then she just shut the camera off, right? And ended up being okay. I know, I thought it was humorous. I think she was annoyed because it felt like it was impeding her productivity, but she, didn't have childcare at that time. And then we agreed to set the meeting time, restructure the meeting frequency and times for a time where it's gonna be a little bit better, at least for her per household. But yeah, I think things like that are happening all the time for all of us. And, you know, I have taken meetings from my car, the really serious ones, which there aren't that many because I'm in a space where I have, you know, 2 teens, 2 dogs, and a spouse. And we're all trying to like navigate through this together. And so it's just, you know, recognizing what's going on with one another and knowing that when I'm on call like this, it's very possible your dog could pop in the picture, Tony. Yeah. And it is what it is. But for those real serious meetings, I've actually have had them in my car.
Yeah. I have right now, Tuesday mornings, I put my dog in the office with my husband. He's got a little blanket in there and he is resting there. I saw Loretta said, I think people need to put their dogs outside for sure. I think like, you know, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And I think when you can, that's great. But it makes me think of, it's just kind of best practice, especially when you're at home. And how many times have we said during the last 2 months, Christine, you're on mute, or, you know, something during a meeting, because I think it is best practice, especially when you have multiple people on the call and you aren't, if you aren't the person that's talking at that time, to just have yourself on mute. So when that background noise happens, it's less distracting for people. And, you know, like sometimes you're just going to have kids in the background and it makes more sense to put yourself on mute for sure, or to turn your camera off. So, and yeah, for some people it's all the time. I totally understand, Loretta. Now we actually have a dog friendly workplace. So this is a conversation we have a lot because there's sometimes where we have 20 dogs in the office. And, you know, managing the just the workspace and the dogs and the noise in the background, especially for those people that are on phones with clients. You know, there's part of it that's a just a expectation setting, but then the ones that are super barky don't really get to spend a lot of time in the office either. So it's, you have less control over that at home, right? And if they're barking all the time, it's super distracting. And I completely agree. We've taken up 27 minutes already, Christine, talking about meetings, and
time flies when we're having fun.
Yeah. What are your big takeaways from today that makes sense for you as far as meetings go?
Yeah, you know, I took some notes on this, and I think, you know, one, really recognizing what is the purpose of this meeting, and do I need to be here, or do these people need to be here to help free up schedules? 2, I love the idea of starting the meeting with some sort of ritual or check-in around well-being. Perhaps it's starting with the camera on and turning it off later. I think that that's great. And I love this idea of exploring any meeting-free zones. I know that's not practical in all organizations, but it does give people an opportunity to recharge, have some what you call deep thinking time. And just, you know, it can be an opportunity to do a reset before you come back to back-to-back meetings. So those are my 3 big takeaways. What would you add to that list, Tony?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm really focused on is making sure that we create that white space in between meetings. I agree with everything that you said. You know, those are all things we're trying to implement. But, you know, we have a tendency, even when we have those meetings that are scheduled for less time, to try to pack something into that white space, or to run over the meeting time because we know there's not another meeting for 10 minutes. And so it's really like sticking to that time frame and ending the meetings on time, 25 minutes or 50 minutes. Here we're going to full 30 minutes an hour time today.
Well, it's 9:29 now.
Yeah.
But I did write that one down too. I think that's a great practice.
Yeah. I think that white space is really important. Just a quick breath, you know, stretching of the legs, a glass of water. Thank you to everybody who came today, and stay tuned. We may be having a very special guest for our wrap up to our 8-week series next week. And we may be expanding our time a little bit for this special guest, talking about servant leadership. I don't think we can say yet who it is, right, Christine? We're still, okay. So we're getting
still working through the schedule a little bit, but
yeah.
we'll keep the group we will keep the group informed.
Yeah, and we're very hopeful to have the special guest with us to wrap up our time together. And so thank you to everybody who was here, who contributed today. And we will see you here again next week.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.